I was born a big town in Poland called Lodz, Lodz. Uh, but we lived in the town of Piotrkow, which is like 30 miles south of Lodz. But my father wanted to make sure that I got the best medical attention, so we went to a bigger city, and that's where I was born. There was five children, including me. As my oldest one was my sister Ronya, who was at least 20 years older than I was. And then there was my brother Isaac, and he was 17 years older than I. Then there was my sister Lola, who was about 16 years older than I. And then there was another sister, Franja, who was only 5 years older than I, and she was the closest to me in age. The reason for the disparity in the ages was that my my father's first wife died, and he married a sister of his former wife. So we were like three quarters. uh, so I was my father youngest one, and I was a boy, and I knew I was my father's favorite because he just spoiled me so much. He got me presents and things, and I would go with him. He was a businessman, and he would meet other business people in restaurants, and they would have just wonderful cakes that were served. And I was the only little kid, and I just loved that. I was really spoiled by my father. Summers we would go to the lake, and we had a cottage, and we had fun over there. Other times we went further away in Poland. My dad owned a flour mill and a sawmill, and we had a house on that ground. And I had a lot of fun. Also, a lot of anti-Semitism too, because the workers out there just hated us Jews. And I got into trouble. I got into trouble like when the machinery opened up the wheels and things, and they were after me to see me. My father came and took me away, and I cried and cried, and I just didn't want to leave, but he did. He stopped by in a village and bought a big candy bar for me, which pacified me. So my life was good. I was going to school, a Jewish school, uh, first or second grade, I think. And I learned of anti-Semitism real early because as I was going to school, there would be Polish kids across the street and they would throw stones at me. And I just didn't understand what was going on, why they were doing that. Then I figured out that it's because I looked Jewish. So after that, I would go to school with my hands covering my face so they wouldn't see me that I was Jewish. It was like my first instance of anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews. Although not all, we had Polish friends that were wonderful people, and my dad did business with them, and they helped us during the war. We were one of the few people that had a car, but we had somebody else's garage, and they would drive us. Uh, we also, I was told, we were the first ones to have a telephone. After the girls left the school, my sisters, they would all come to my house and wonder play with the telephone. We were rich at one time and then we were poor another time. It depended on the economy. You know, as my brother said, one day you're a millionaire and the next day you're a pauper. So things were tough. There was the 30s, there was the Depression. Well, my mother was one of 6 sisters. And I don't know. I think I was too much trouble for her. I was such a rebel. I think that she said to my dad, take him and take care of him. I can handle him. But in other words, she gave her life for me. So she was a wonderful mother. We were not Orthodox, so we observed the holidays. I used to go with my dad to the synagogue, and I had a real nice time being with him. I wouldn't stay inside for too long. If I could go outside and play with the kids. And we observed all the holidays, but we were not observant and 100% kosher. And my mother once gave me money and told me to go get a ham sandwich, which is unheard of. But it happened. My older sister, Ronya, she was almost my mother's age, and she was wonderful towards me. She was just very loving and caring, and she would encourage me things, and I missed her when she was gone. Lola I didn't care for very much. It was always the same. She was always into criticizing us. I used to try to be like all the other poor kids, like they wouldn't have no shoes, they would wear barefooted, so I wore barefooted, and she would complain about me. But she was also engaged to a Jewish soldier, so that never happened, but she was engaged. She survived the war. Isaac, my brother, yeah, well, he kind of he was so much different in age between us, but he kind of approached me with a very stern hand. You know, he told me what to do and what not to do, and he was good. He was very. He didn't show any love, nor anything like that. He was kind of rough, but I knew he cared for me, and I cared for him a lot. He was my big brother, especially when he would come home in his Polish soldier uniform. That really impressed me. Izzy ran the business, but he had to get the approval of my father, and he would do things, more modern things. My father would get very mad at that. He didn't, but they were fine. They loved each other. Franja was the youngest one, and she was she was a wonderful teenager. You know, full, lots of energy, and she had lots of friends around her, and the boys liked her a lot. You know, and so I would spend time with her because she had to take me to the circus, and she had to take me here and there where she wanted to. She had to take me as well. So she was wonderful. She was a lovable kid. There was a lot of fear in the air. We were all afraid. We knew Germany was much more powerful than Poland. Although the Poles used to boast about their army and things like that, they they had one machine gun for 20 soldiers, something like that. wasn't going to be good, and they were anti-Semitic. The Nationalist Party in Poland was anti-Semitic, although there was lots of Jewish soldiers in the Polish army, not too many in the officer rank. When the war started, uh, my city was bombed, and we were down in the cellar. And this is the first time I knew what it was to feel real fear. Uh, and they destroyed a part of the town. We went out of the cellar, and my dad said, "We got to escape from this town. They're going to come back and bomb it again." So there was, seems like most of the Jewish population of Piotrkow was on its way to a village called Sulejev, which is about 10 miles away. And so it was a kind of a happy time. I was walking with my father, and my father was telling me some of the history of my family. I never knew that I had a sister who had died at age 13, heart problems. Uh, and we went into this little village, and it was crowded. There was lots of people from my hometown there. And it was like a festive time. Started playing football or something like that, and then all of a sudden I heard these airplane noises coming from the sky, and as I looked up, these planes came flying down, and they were so low that I swear I could reach out my hand and touch them, and they were shooting their machine guns. And I was frozen to the spot. I couldn't move. Then I felt my mother grab me by my shoulders, and she knocked me down to the ground. And then she did something really fantastic. She lay on top of me. She covered me completely with her body so as to protect me. Uh, but after a while, I heard my sister Frania crying, and my mother got off of me and she ran to her. And I remained laying there on the ground, hugging the ground. But after a while, I stood up, and I saw a lot of people with limbs missing, they were burned. Uh, and I heard my name Sevek being called, and my father and I met each other, and we ran into a nearby forest. And there were lots of people in the forest, including some Polish army units. So I'm curious, I'm always interested in soldiers. I woke up to them and I asked them that they know my brother, and they said, "Get away, you Jew." So here it really felt bad. Here I was, and they treated me that way. We went back after 3 days, we slept on the ground. We came back into that village, and the village was completely destroyed. And there was, like I was later learned, there was something like 1,000 people had been killed that day. Uh, there was no sign of my mother. Uh, my dad took me when we had a horse-drawn carriage, a friend of his, and I got up on her, I took the reins. That was my consolation to quiet me down so I could drive the horses. And we went back into my hometown. And my building was bombed. So we went to my Aunt Rachel, somebody who I really loved, was my mother's sister. She was just wonderful. She just loved me. She protected me in every way. I mean, when my sister Ronia got married, they didn't. They brought me to my aunt. They didn't want me to stay because I would be in too much trouble. And she was so mad. She had her son take me back to the house. um, I, I tried to. My aunt put me down on a soft bed to go to sleep. I couldn't sleep. I got used to sleeping on the ground. So I went and I slept on the ground. This is when the ghetto was almost immediately established, the first one in Poland. And we were pushed into we got a room and a half. A lot of people didn't have any room at all, and they slept on the streets. And typhus broke out. We fought it steady, but I think I got sick. I got sick with typhus. One day I am better, and I just get up out of bed and I walk on the street, and a calmness comes over me, a real calmness, and like I feel really good, and I just I'm kind of told that I'm going to be okay no matter what, that I will survive. In the ghetto, there was they didn't have walls in the ghetto. They just had signs that say, and you couldn't leave after 5 o'clock. You weren't allowed to go out. I don't think anybody really survived unless they had some connections with the outside world. It's why the real religious Jews, the Orthodox ones, they were into their own community. They had no outside connections with Gentile Poles, and they were the first ones to go because they had no connections and no help. But we managed. In the ghetto, we managed. My dad had connections, and the people that were most help were German Poles, Poles of German descent. And that my dad did business with them, and I think he might have signed off his property to them. And they came in and they helped us. They gave us, we were not like other people. We were not hungry enough to eat. We still observed all Jewish traditions. And there was a Jewish police that enforced the rule in the ghetto, but people would be taken off the street and they would be put to work, or you would never see them again, including my cousin. I lost my cousin right there. Uh, but we still lived as a family unit and was cohesive, you know. I didn't have any school. Now, it could be because of me, but there was school available. I mean, there was Jewish schools, women teachers held classes, but it was dangerous. But there was still education going on. I didn't learn nothing. I don't know why, but I just never. So I didn't go to school or anything. And it would take a significant hurt later on that I didn't. I didn't have the fundamentals. So I only had like 1 year of school. Also, my sister, the one I loved so much, she was pregnant and she was in a lovely Polish family came to us and said, we're going to put her into a Catholic hospital and save her. And that's what we did. But I later learned that somebody in the hospital informed the Germans that there was a Jew there pretending to be a Pole. They came in and she had delivered a boy. They took him and they threw him out the window. And then they took her to the Piotrkow cemetery and shot her. I didn't know about it, but I met her husband and he told me, and it really took me to the worst. I just cried and cried. I just I had lost my sister. Isaac he was in the war, he was wounded, and he was in Germany. It's a real big contrast between the Germans later and then. He was severely wounded on his leg, and they put him into a German hospital in Poland, and they gave him real good attention. And after a year or so, he came back into the ghetto. And it comes 42, October or something. The Germans have the Weisse conference where they decide that they're going to murder all the Jews. So now begins, they invade Russia, and it now begins the elimination of Jews. That's the policy now. And they have these places like Auschwitz and others for murdering the Jews. So what happens is that the policy is almost based on the railroad. So we watch the train come to a town south of us, and the Jews are emptied out and put onto these trains. And they say the U-turn is going to come. But they also tell us that about 1,500 of us would be able to stay behind. Now we were about 30,000 at that point. So everybody wanted to have the job, right? So I worked in a glass factory. The day came where the trains were there for us. And we're basically religious people. And you have no other hope. So what do, you pray. I mean, but that will always stay in my mind. It's not a prayer like we do now. We go in and sing a song and like that. People would fall on the floor and they would bang their head against the wall and they would cry out. And that's when I lost my faith in God. There was no help. There was no help. The day comes when the trains are there for us, and they go house to house. They shoot people, old people. They shoot them right then and there. People are covered with the white, what do you call it, Jewish...
Tallis? The tallis?
Tallis, yeah. Some of them are dressed like you're dead. Nothing helped. They were all killed. And so this is a pivotal moment. The trains are going to take us to Treblinka, where they would be all. So I stood there with my dad and Izzy, and the German officer came, and Izzy talked to him in German, and I put something in his hand, and he smiled, and he told us to go to our work. In the meantime, I understood later from Lola that my mother and Franja and Ronja were all in line to get on to the train. But Lola knew some German official, and she begged him to come and take him out of the line. And he says he would, but he wouldn't take my mother because he said she was too old. Franja she was so attached to her mother that she tore herself away from Lola. I just never knew what happened to her. I never knew. We kind of thought for a long time that maybe she found refuge in some Polish home or something. And my sister Lola was telling me, I held on to her hand. I held on. I asked her, I begged her not to run away. But she couldn't be separated from her mother. And so they were all, we presume, were all put on the train, went to Treblinka. That's no question. That's a historical fact. So that's where they were murdered. My brother was able to get some work permits, so we went to our workplace, and I was the only kid. There was like 20, 30 Jewish workers. I was the only kid, and they gave me some dirty eyes, like it was, how come I'm so privileged? And they took me and put me on a loft, and so that because the fear was that somebody worker would inform on me, so they took me down at nighttime, and I was with the rest of the Jewish workers. It took me, and that took influence to a woodworking factory called Bugaj, and so there was my father was there, my brother, and I, and some cousins were all there, and this was there's an argument going on whether it was really a slave labor camp or not, because it was relatively okay. The owners of the factory, the Germans, they just wanted to stay out of the war. You know, they didn't want to be sent to the East Front. And like I had some adventures there. You know, I helped my brother smuggle food into the camp. And one day I had a sack of potatoes on my shoulder, and this owner of the factory, he gets me as a dog, and it's like a rifle, and this dog is really at me, but he didn't bite me. And this owner took out his revolver and took the bullet out of it and said, see, this is going to go into your head. And I cried, of course, and he was puffing. Actually, he was not a bad guy. But he turned me over to the local police, and there were Poles. And so this guy's going to hit me, and I figured, oh no, I'm okay. I know he knows my family. He's not going to, but he did. He whipped me really bad. But, you know, I got to the point where I was begging him not to hurt me. I said in Polish, I said, my ass is not made out of glass. You know, go ahead. And I became a hero in the camp because I had to fight it. So that was a minor thing, really, compared to what was going on. We were relatively benign in that woodworking factory. We didn't go hungry. We had food. Again, it's all a matter of influence. Even under those circumstances, who you are, where you are, what money you had, made a critical difference. Now comes 1944, the war is almost over, and the German army is retreating through Russia and Poland. And we figured the war is going to come to an end, and we're going to be liberated in our hometown, so we can start it in our hometown. But they have different ideas. They take there's 2,000 of us left. And now, for the very first time, I'm marched into a station where there's a train with like cattle carts waiting for me. And I just don't want to go in, and they throw me in, and I'm separated from my father and my brother. And inside is, you can't sit, it's nothing to drink, and no washroom facilities, everything takes off. And I I don't remember what happened. It was a 3-day journey. Uh, I asked my friends after the war, and they asked me, "Don't you remember this and that and so on?" I said, "No, I have no memory. My memory was blank." Finally, the train pulls up in Buchenwald. That's the concentration camp. And we were quickly unloaded and beaten out, and went to the area where they stripped us and gave us some. Oh, we went to the showers, and the showers, we were afraid that was it, But somebody said there was no gas in Buchenwald, and believe it or not, warm water came down. It was incredible. So we got, Henry and I was my best friend, and we were all together throughout this whole ordeal. We got clothes that was, strip pajama type of stuff. They shaved my hair, all of my hair off my body, of everybody's body. And they put us into a Jewish section of Buchenwald that was absolutely, the rest of the camp was like orderly, but this was, it was impossibly terrible. That's the word. You went to the washroom, it was just covered with, it was totally, it makes me sick even to think about it. I love washrooms. We had to be on a Pelplatz, we had to be on a place, uh, like we had to stand on the meeting place. What do you call it? What?
Roll call?
Yeah, a roll call twice a day, and it was winter. I got there in December. It was cold, and they would have fun with us, would make us sing songs, and it was pretty bad. But there was some good stuff going on in Buchenwald. There was a organization. The prisoners, usually the German political prisoners, were in charge of the camp, and they they took us away from the Jewish section and put us in Camp 23, I think, Barrack 23, and that was relatively okay, you know. My father, whom I loved very much, I saw him in Buchenwald, and he was glad to see me, but I didn't feel any affection for him. I was on my own. Didn't have his protection anymore. And he was, when I met him and I didn't show any caring for him, he was on his way to a place underground where they made missiles. Barbara will know the name. I can't remember names. And that's the last time I saw him. They make us all go out on the plaza, and the commandant of the camp, the prisoner commandant, was a German, and we had these what do you call them, red triangles for political prisoners, yellow, and so on, and then for Jews it was yellow, I believe. So he told us, tear off your thing. And he told the Germans, there are no Jews here. He was really a great guy.
Why did he do that? Was he protecting you from something?
Yeah, he was protecting us. Yeah. Yeah, it was days before the end of the war. So some of the German guards told us to drop our pants. And if we were circumcised, they took us and put us into a warehouse. And in that warehouse, I see my beloved uncle and two beloved cousins. But I know there's something not right here. I hear machine gun fire. And a person from the underground came to me and Henry and says, I'm going to talk to the guards and let you get out of here. But, pick up a garbage pail and go out. So I said, come on, Henry, let's go. We went out, picked up everything, went by the post where the German soldiers were. One was an officer, and he took out his gun. When the soldier said nothing, he let us go. But the officer, he took out his revolver, and he was shooting after us. But we ran like heck, left and right, and he didn't hit us. We couldn't stay in the camp. We were told to go out on the march, and about 3,000 prisoners, including half of them Russian soldiers. The gates of Buchenwald opened up, and we were going. So it's a beautiful day, and we began to march towards Weimar. That's the next big town where the railroad stations was. Went on this march, and in front of me was a father and a son. I think they were Hungarians. You see, the Hungarians came interview them. They came into the war in 1944. They were only in the war less than a year. That's why many of them are better educated and everything, because they were able to go to school and things. Anyway, in front of me was a father, Hungarian father and son. This was an 8-mile trip, and the father pushed himself away from the sun, and he said, and fell into the ditch. And he said, and the son was shrieking for him to stand up. But there was the guard with the rifle, and we heard a shot, and that was the end. So we came to Weimar, beautiful town, and another train awaits us. See, a lot of the very next day that we left Buchenwald, the American army arrived. One day, I mean, I meet with these guys that in Buchenwald, and they were so lucky. Elie Wiesel was there, but he was able to go back to his barrack because there was a bombing, and he got liberated by the Americans. We went on a train ride of 3 or 4 weeks, open cars, and except for the first day when we had a loaf of bread, we had nothing. That's when we ate grass, and we saw people eat human flesh, and it was just, that was the worst part of my experience. The Germans were losing the war, of course, and they didn't know where to go, because if they wanted to go one place, it was already too late. It was already occupied by the Allies. You see, so they just moved back and forth. Finally, we arrived in Theresienstadt. You know Theresienstadt. You know, and to us, it seemed like we just had come to the Conrad Hilton, you know, because the people were living as families, they were in homes, although there was unseen that was still sent to Auschwitz. But it was totally different for us. I got typhus, I was very sick. I thought I was going to die, but I had the image of my father and mother coming to me and saying I must survive. And I opened my eyes, and there was some wonderful young people from England that came as volunteers, and they took me to a home, and they fed me slowly. That was important, because people gorged themselves and the stomach couldn't handle it, and you know, and they died. So and one day while I'm in that house, I hear my name Sevek being called from the street. So I run to the window, and lo and behold, there's my brother walking the street shouting my name, because he had heard that there was a kid from Buchenwald that had come. So once I met my brother, I was delighted. I was so happy, and I didn't have to make any more decisions on my own. My brother would take care of me. We desperately tried hard to find, and we couldn't find anybody. We found a cousin, 2 cousins. Don't forget, we had a huge family, 6 sisters, you know, and they all had large families. And we couldn't find anybody else. The British government allowed 1,000 young people to come to England once they were under the age of 16 or 13, something like that. And most of the kids were adults, like young adults. So they changed our certificate. We didn't have a certificate. We didn't have a birth certificate. So everybody became younger. And the British government sent Lancaster planes to Prague. And we were on top. That's the picture of my book. It was very difficult. It's very difficult because I didn't know the language, but I picked it up quickly. So it was terrible in the sense that, in the boarding school came the Parents' Day, all the parents would come in and so on. You wouldn't have anyone. Come the holidays, they don't know what to do with you. So they look for some family that will take you to. Uh, it was bad. But the school was so loving and caring, and the teachers were just fabulous, and that helped a lot. Yeah, I'm still suffering a little bit from that. It's just I don't have the empathy uh, that normal people have. Uh, Even under the worst of circumstances, your wife dies, you find another one. You never grieved. We were told to forget about it. I've heard that from other survivors. That's right. That's what we were told. Well, famous people like Freud's daughter Anne, she came to see us and she told us to forget about it. This interview kind of reminds me that how much unhappiness I work through. I didn't get much loving and caring from my brother or my sister, for that matter. They were themselves very dramatized. My brother came to England with us, and he's, he went into business. He has a son and a daughter, uh, and he's got many, many grandchildren. He's gone, of course, but he's got many, many grandchildren, many of them living in Israel. Lola, uh, she lived in a displaced person camp. But he's still around, and we take care of him. You know, uh, they lived their life. They lived here. This was their home. Yeah, they lived here. They died, like we all do. Uh, but they were dramatized. My sister was terribly dramatized. She was. She always thought I was taking advantage of her. I was going to steal from her, or something like that. Just the way she needed help so badly, and she never got it. Well, this was years later, and they want to know the history. They determined to know, so I decided I was going to tell her. And I drive down to Shabana, and we talk. And I tell her the whole story. She's Uh, she's very moved. Uh, the the museum in Washington was opening then, and decided that we were going to go as a family. So my wife and I and Ruth and Leon and we and as I go into the museum and I see the historical things and I just kind of explain it to them and everything. But then I see the other room, the train, and the train really sets me off, you know. And they come around me and they hug me and they make it possible for me to go on. And it becomes the beginning of my career as a storyteller. I've been in Germany to German audiences. I spoke in Canada. When I lived in Chicago, I would do like 40 talks a year. I sold 30,000 books, and I sold them all myself, you know. I'm just surprised completely by the reaction to my books. Um, Kids that read it read like circles. They read different books, you know. They like mine the best. That's not me saying it, it's them saying it. So the book has become a powerful. I did it. It's good enough. And if I can succeed in giving it away like I plan to, and I've done my job. It's okay. It's all right for me to die. It doesn't upset me very much. Uh, but I do want to leave behind, and I have. I mean, I have so much for my son and my daughters. The two daughters that I have that are not biological daughters, but they love me very much. They just were here. My other daughter and my son, they will definitely carry on this. And but the most important thing is I didn't think so at first, but it's the book. The book will, and they will promote it. And so I'm satisfied with my life. No, I never found my face. I wanted to. I wanted to. I think people who are religious have a benefit. They're better off. But I could never. Thinking of these people when the train came, crying their eyes out and hitting themselves, and my God, you don't know what that means. You ever seen people pray like that? So what do I say? Evil people will always, but it frightens us a little bit about what's going on in America today. But there's so many good people. I mean, wearing my hat, you could see the people in the airport. They stop me and they make me talk to them, and not everybody, but enough.